Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Under Defeat. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer G.Rev, Under Defeat originally released to arcades in 2005. Now jump to February of 2025, and we have this version available for the Xbox, the PlayStation 4 and 5, the PC, and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. This particular release is the third time Under Defeat's seen release on consoles. The first was on the Dreamcast. Then we had Under Defeat HD for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. And now we have this version, which is basically a remastered of HD. It's definitely the definitive version though, as it takes the excellent HD but adds an additional game mode to it and significantly cleans up the performance of that title. So gone are the significant slowdown issues that you had with HD, but you still have the awesome gameplay of Under Defeat. So I really did enjoy HD when it released back in 2012, but this game takes my enjoyment of the title to a whole new level. If you enjoy G.Rev shoot 'em ups or just vertical scrollers in general, this is one that I recommend you try. With that said, we find ourselves at the main menu. There are now 3 game modes you can enjoy the game in. We have the original arcade mode, and especially if you're looking to play the title in Tate, this will be the mode for you. It's also great to be able to experience the more original version of the game. Then you have New Order mode. This is taken from HD. It's a widescreen presentation to the game, and I think it looks and plays great. Then we have the New Order Mode Plus, which is the new version for this release. It takes New Order and adds some new mechanics to it. I personally haven't put a lot of time into this one, but one of the things I have noticed is it feels like it slows down the gameplay. So it's one that is worth trying, but depending on how fast of a pace you're looking for in a game, that may or may not be the mode for you. For our purposes today though, we will be showing off the game in New Order mode. Selecting your mode, we're taken to the screen here, which allows you to adjust some of the settings before we dive into the gameplay itself. So you can adjust your difficulty as well as the player stock here, and that will also affect whether or not you can post scores to the online leaderboard. And then we have our options for background music as well. So there's 4 different music selections we can make. There's the original soundtrack, an arranged soundtrack, New Order, and also boosted. And you can adjust this for both the primary loop and the second loop, which is what the game refers to as extra. So you can unlock this through normal gameplay. However, once you've defeated the game, you can start the second loop just from this menu. So that is quite nice. Starting the game. So one of my complaints I do have about the game is I don't feel this tutorial that we're given here does the greatest job of explaining all the gameplay, specifically if you've changed some of the settings that I'll talk about momentarily. So from here we can have the second character join, and then we can jump to our helicopter selection. There are 4 helicopters available. The first 2 are just your default player 1, player 2. Then we have one that's a white helicopter, which will use the special weapons in a different way, and then one that's basically your original helicopter but equipped with homing missiles. Pretty awesome. So we'll be showing off those 2 helicopters just to give you an idea of the varied gameplay. And then you have the option to either have normal or reverse for the way your helicopter sweeps. So one of the things I really like about Under Defeat, both something that was added in HD, and fortunately they have that in this version as well, is the game's control scheme. So in the original version of the game, you sweep the helicopter left and right by releasing the fire button. Then once you're pointing in the direction you wish to fire, you press the fire button again. However, in HD and in this version, you can also turn on a twin stick mode, which will allow you to go and sweep the helicopter back and forth in your attack pattern without having to release your fire button. So it does an excellent job of allowing you to control the field, and it just feels great. That's one of the things I love most about this game, is just the way that the whole control scheme feels when you're playing it. It's part of how I was able to go and play so much of Under Defeat HD when it released back on the PlayStation 3. So now let's talk about some of the other mechanics. So in addition to your twin stick style shot, we also have a gun pod that's equipped for most of the helicopters that you can select. So for the red helicopter, which is equipped with homing missiles as a bonus for its power, we also have a gun pod which is available also on the default player 1 and player 2 helicopters. So the way that gun pod works, if you release your fire button, you'll charge up that gun pod, which the meter for that is right above your bomb selection. Then when you fire again, once that meter is fully charged, you'll release that gun pod. And the gun pod comes in one of 3 flavors. So you've got the Vulcan, which is basically a machine gun. It'll point in the direction that you're initially firing and deal some pretty good damage in a short range. You also have a cannon, which fires a powerful shot and will home on enemies. And lastly, a rocket, which is one shot, very powerful, but a little hard to aim. In addition to that, we also have bombs, which you saw used against that particular boss. We'll talk a little bit more about the bosses here momentarily. One thing to note, when you're playing the game in 2-player mode, one of the things that's kind of interesting, and you do have to be careful, it's possible to push the other player around the screen. The 2 helicopters do have collision with each other, so that's something you do have to be careful of if you're playing 2-player. So, as far as the gun pod and your shots are concerned, that's the way that the first helicopter, your main helicopters, as well as the red helicopter, also happen to function. But the white helicopter behaves differently, and that's one of the reasons I picked it, is I wanted to go and show off the mechanics that this one has. So the white helicopter doesn't have the optional gun pods that you can use. Instead, it uses the special weapons you pick up by itself. So if you're equipped with Vulcan, then you have a fairly regular shot. However, if you collect the cannon or the rocket, then you'll have that weapon behavior for your main weapon without having to charge up a gun pod or fire. The rocket in particular isn't as powerful as the gun pod version, but it's still very effective at dealing heavy damage to bosses. Same with the cannon. So for our purposes here, we can try swapping to the cannon. Next we have the opportunity, and you can see how that will change up the mechanics for the white helicopter. So the second stage is one of the most impressive visually, I feel, for this particular title, as you've got all these battleship battles where we're attacking these really well-designed ships with tons and tons of gun emplacements. And one of the things I think is also neat is the way that these shots fire. So we're definitely trying to take them out as fast as possible, so you might not see as many shots, but when you're attacking enemies that are on the ground, or rather when they're attacking you, you can see the shot rise up momentarily. So if you're, say, happen to be underneath them, you actually have a moment where you can potentially see that shot coming and dodge. I really like just that little design element that we have in the gameplay. So now we've got the cannon equipped on the white helicopter. You see I'm not firing as many shots, but the shots I am firing are significantly more powerful. So as far as bombs are concerned, the game is fairly generous with how often it gives you additional stock for those, and you can carry up to 6 stock. That's one way you can also gain extra points at the end of the stage. You do get a fair number of points for having additional bombs in your inventory. So we'll use a bomb to clear out a lot of the smaller cannons on the ship. So now we go and basically find ourselves at the final battle of this particular stage. And one of the things that this does a good job of highlighting is the multi-target element of all the bosses. So regardless of the scale of the bosses you're fighting, there'll always be several targets you have to destroy to clear the boss stage. So in the case of this particular battleship, you don't actually have to destroy all the cannons, but it would make life particularly difficult if you didn't. The main weak point for the ship itself is actually the bridge tower that will be attacking here shortly. But once again, I do appreciate all the detail, design, and just the sheer number of emplacements that they have on the particular ship itself. Now, moving on to the final phase of the fight. So it is actually possible to deal damage depending on which weapons you're using to the tower before you get to this section, and it's best to take that opportunity when it presents itself, just so you can quickly take out the ship, and then we get this awesome explosion and we move on to the next stage. And that's basically Under Defeat HD served up for your enjoyment. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, one of the things I do feel the game has a problem with is it's on the shorter side. So we've seen stage 1 and stage 2, but there are only 5 stages total. There is that second loop, but that's something to keep in mind. The game is on the shorter side. And then the other big issue is just the lack of instruction and tutorialization, specifically for the newer game modes. So there's no mention of in the instructions of the twin stick controls. I do realize that those tutorial screens are from the arcade version. However, it would have been nice to have some additional instructions put in there for the other ways you could potentially play the game. But on the plus flavors, I definitely feel that this is the best version of the game itself. Especially when we can look at the PlayStation 3 version, which I loved and I played all the way to completion. Like, this version is so superior. I honestly not sure. Well, going back to just to record this footage, I had a hard time actually playing the game. It just doesn't feel right with all the slowdown that the title itself has. So that's definitely the biggest thing I can say about this particular title, is this is the definitive way to play Under Defeat. I also just love the control scheme that this game has. That whole twin stick feel, if you have that turned on, it feels so intuitive, natural. I feel like this is the way that this game is meant to be played. And then lastly, I just really like the way that the stages are designed in this game. So you have some really great enemies as far as the overall presentation, the way that the mechs are like modeled, the way that the whole set pieces are set up. This stage is a great example of that. We have all these enemies that are attacking our own forces, so you see both your allies as well as the enemies, and just the whole presentation and the way that the battles are set up is just amazing. So at the end of the day, Under Defeat, this particular release is an easy recommend. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.